Hi, I'm Pete Holloway. I'm a retired financial advisor and a retired certified financial planner. And as always, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to On Money. We've been looking at lots of careers, and we're discussing a career today that I haven't. This show's been around since 2008, and one that we've never explored, and it's kind of glamorous. My guest today is Ray Blust. He's a Wheeling native, was in the first class at Wheeling Park, got his second lieutenant from the Air Force Academy, where he instructed in T-38s and F-4s, all on active duty. He's been with American Airlines for 32 years. He just retired. The FAA has a rule that when you turn 65, you're done. So if you're Sully, you're out. And he has a big smile on his face because of the retirement, but all that great training and so forth is now gone. He flew at the end of his career the 787 Dreamliner, international routes, Europe, Asia, Southeast Asia, and so forth. He has two children. And Ray, I want to thank you for coming aboard. Tell me about your career in aviation.
Well, Pete, probably like yours, somebody took you flying, and that was my older brother who flew in the Navy before Vietnam. He took me flying around West Lafayette and Coshocton, Ohio. I never did have that burning desire to be a pilot, but it just kind of set me off in that direction as far as the military was concerned. Both my brothers were in, Harold was in the Navy and Chuck was in the Air Force, and I decided to enlist in the Air Force. I didn't go in as an officer right away. I enlisted. Had some great mentors that helped me along the way, and they set me on towards the academy and applying to the academy. I got accepted to the prep school at the academy where we basically worked on mathematics and English. Got to the academy and majored in mechanical engineering, and I did my orientation flying there. It wasn't glamorous, even though it was up against the Rocky Mountains, because mine started in January of '83. So in the dead of winter, we're going out to the flight line at 6 a.m, and those planes were cold even as we were landing.
What did you fly at that time?
They were
with the Cessna 172, or
they were 172s, but they were T-41. This is but they were more powerful engines because we were flying. We were starting at 6,000 feet. That was our takeoff altitude. So you needed a little better, bigger engine. Yeah. So we did about 20 hours there, and that's basically to weed out anybody that really doesn't have the initial. Can actually handle the flying, they believe. So from there, I went to Laughlin Air Force Base down in Texas for pilot training. Did pretty well. They asked me to come back, and I came back to fly the T-38 as an instructor. That was very rewarding to take kids never flying that particular jet to getting their Air Force wings and watching them go off into their career. After that, my wife and I, we went to Bergstrom, and I flew the F-4s after that, went to Korea, flew them there, came back to Texas, and separated from the military in July of '91 and got hired by American in July '91. And at that time, everyone who was getting hired by the airlines became flight engineers, not first officers. We worked on the panels because the aircraft, they were a little bit older, and we had to take care of some systems at that time as engineers. And I did that for about 3 years out of Chicago and Dallas, then transitioned to the Fokker F-100, carried about 100 people, loved that domestically, flying around the country. And then in 2000, went into the big boys, transitioned to the Boeing 757 and 767 out of New York. And that's where I started flying to Europe and South America. And then in 2013, transitioned over to the Boeing 787 Dreamliner and finished my career on that airplane. And I started picking up going to China out of Chicago on that airplane. And that was phenomenal jet, phenomenal.
That's great.
For pilots and for passengers.
Now, it's got to be a heck of a responsibility. Not only are you buying a multi-$100 million piece of equipment, but you have the lives of a lot of people in your hands. Tell us about a typical day. You arrive at the airport, then what happens? And let's fly you to Frankfurt, okay?
Okay. Well, first,
what goes on?
There is no typical day because there are so many. You've flown, right?
Yeah.
There's so many variables involved as far as flying a trip. Going to, say, Europe, and most of the European flights leave later in the afternoon, evening. So you get to the operations as a minimum 2 hours prior to departure. You meet in operations, you go through all the paperwork. We make sure we are all ready to go. Anytime we're flying to Europe, we typically have 3 pilots. Anytime we fly over 8 hours, we're required to have 3. Over 12 hours, you need 4 pilots. So anytime we went to China or to Japan, we would need 4 pilots because that's over a 12-hour flight. So you're in operations, you're taking care of yourselves, you're taking care of the paperwork, making sure everybody agrees that, hey, this is a good route. We check the weather because, over the Atlantic, anything can be happening. We're checking the winds, the turbulence and stuff like that, making sure we've got enough fuel. And I don't say that like, well, we just barely have enough to get there. No, we want enough that we have a nice cushion so that we land or something happens, we can go somewhere else. As a divert.
Excuse me, on choosing the route, do you do that or does operations
The FAA typically does that. Going over to Europe, there are what we call tracks, and they are on 1 degree separation, 60 miles. And there's going to be a group of, say, 6 tracks, A through F. And separating those tracks, you have your different altitudes from like 31,000 to 41,000. So you may be on track F at 37,000 feet. And a lot of times we'll call and go, hey, do you see this weather down there? Why are we on that track and not up north? And they'll go, oh, well, we'll change that. So we have those options to call people, and it's very simple to change those because once you get going and you're on that track, there's hundreds of airplanes on those tracks. It's not unusual to be over the North Atlantic and look out and have, planes underneath of you, right above you. We're only separated by 1,000 feet, and there's planes pretty much everywhere on our way over. We all have different jobs as far as in the airplane. The captain and first officer will get in and take care of the airplane and get it set up. The other pilot will go out and do the walk around. We do walk around inspections on every flight. And then when we have the 3 pilots, once we take off, the 3rd pilot will go back for anywhere from a 2 to a 3 hour break. He'll come up and relieve whoever's flying, and they'll go back for a break, and vice versa for the other pilot. We all have to be in the cockpit for takeoff and landing. And we spend the last hour to hour and a half getting ready for the arrival into an airport like Frankfurt or Paris, because there's so many variables involved in landing at those airports. If you're going to land on the southern part of the airport, taxiing back to where our gates are, we have to go over all that information because, they're not very patient when there's somebody right behind you and you sit there and go, hey, can you help us get there? And they're like, no, you need to know what you're doing. So we're all on board and trying to figure out, how to get to our gate. Now, the big problems are over in Asia because it's hard to understand some of the Chinese, especially in some of their instructions. So there really isn't a typical day as far as an international flight or a domestic flight. We're two different airlines, really, domestic and international.
You were talking about all the planes. Did you ever know Danny Eisman? I think that name will be recognized by a lot of the viewers.
He was U.S. Airways.
He was the head trainer for U.S. Airways. And
yes,
I saw him one day, this was back when I was flying, I said, can I ride in the simulator? And he called a week later, said, come on up. So I got to fly in the simulator, and I was with a Czech pilot. So, yeah. And we're flying along. We're over outside of 100 miles off of Boston over the Atlantic. And he said, smoke in the cockpit, descend immediately. And the pilot looked at me and said, your plane. So I'm starting down, and Danny said, turn, what was it, 90 degrees to the right. He said, if you keep descending that way, you're going to run into somebody. And it's the kind of thing that, I've always remembered that. And then at the end, the problem was solved. And Danny said, you got a problem? I said, what is it? And he said, you're still flying south. This is one of the problems, I guess, that you get so focused on the one issue that you lose sight of everything else. Tell me a little about ATC, air traffic control, and what they do for you, and how you two, the pilot and ATC, work together.
When I saw that question, I was like, wow, that's something that you don't, a question that you don't get very often. Just to give you an idea of air traffic control and how it works is, when we're parked at the gate, American Airlines owns the ramp. So then we have to talk to our company, who is coordinated with, say, Chicago ground control, that we can go ahead and push back. Now, once we push back, we got to talk to metering, who meters everybody. And they say, oh yeah, okay, you're clear to go. Go ahead and contact ground. Now you got to talk to ground. And that's where you got to listen, because they're going to tell you, hey, follow this airplane. You're going to go over here. You're going to go to this runway. Typically, the big airplanes go to the longer runways. So you always have an idea of where you're going. And that's where guys can get in trouble, is you think you know where you're going to go pretty much all the time. And then they tell you, turn left, you go over here. And, oh, wait a minute, we're not used to that. Let's stop and figure this out. So air traffic control basically, vectors us from A to B to C. And there's different groups of air traffic control. So there's the ground control that takes care of the ground part of the airport. Then you transition to tower, which gives you clearance to take off. And they have jurisdiction probably 5 to 10 miles around the airport in an upside down wedding cake scenario, as far as the altitudes are concerned. Then they'll send you over to departure control, which controls even further out. And then you get into the center controllers. And now they have a system, it's called the CPDLC. Have you ever heard of that? Where it's a data link system. It's basically, they're controlling by texting us. You'll be in the airplane and you'll hear ding, ding, and you'll look up and they're saying, air traffic controller, whoever you're with, say it's Indianapolis Center, contact another Indianapolis Center, and you say accept. It comes down in your radio and you just hit a button and it's there. You don't talk to anybody. They don't talk to you. They can give you vectors. They can have you descend, climb through this system. So the advancements are incredible, what's going on as far as the air traffic control. And
so you don't have to change the frequency.
On our airplane, it comes up in our radio, and then you just insert it, and then it's there. But you still have to follow frequencies all the way. Say you're going from New York to Los Angeles, but you wouldn't necessarily have to talk to anybody. You might hear the controllers, and they might not talk to you the whole way, but you're just accepting the frequencies and changing all the way, from Chicago through Cleveland, Kansas City, Denver, and all the way into LA Center.
Okay. Take us to the end. Okay, you're 200 miles away from where you're going. Tell us a little about the procedures that, as you get closer to the airport, what goes on.
Basically, what we do, the first thing is, like you would know, let's get the weather. Let's find out what's going on at the airport. And then that's kind of spins you up as far as, okay, now which way are they landing? Because and that'll tell you in the ATIS, the information, the terminal information that we get for the weather. And that'll tell you what runway. And then now you know the runway, then you're going to figure out what arrival you're going to do. So you put that in your system in the airplane, but you have already put that in the airplane before we even took off, just as a guess as far as what they're going to do. But we're always cross-checking that. We're, like I said, checking the weather, getting our gate information, making and getting the other guy up. All three of us are there. You start your arrival in. You go into London. It's totally different procedures than going into Paris because they have a continuous descent rate. They'll tell you, say you're at 7,000 feet, and when they say, "Hey, you're at 18 miles from the arrival from landing," basically we have a chart just in London that it says, "Okay, 18 miles. We're at 6,000 feet." They want us to do a continuous descent all the way around in. Paris and all these others, they don't really care that much, but the airspace around London is just so congested that you got to follow these procedures. So it really does require three of us to be up there, all of us on our A game, listening to what's going on, and guys bringing up different little tidbits about, hey, you know, when we land, we can't go on that taxiway because we're a big airplane. Okay, we got to go this way, and they've changed this or changed that. So there's so many different variables involved as far as what we're looking at when we go into an airport.
Okay. Now, this next question is a little political, but I'm going to drop it on you anyway. There have been some questions about aircraft manufacturers recently. Okay. What are your thoughts on that? Do you trust? You got to trust the equipment. I would think that would be
yes,
the first thing.
Yeah, you do. And I've flown Boeing airplanes for the last probably, out of my 32 years, all but like 7 years of it, I was flying on the Fokker. So I've flown Boeing airplanes. They're great airplanes. They probably do have some problems going on over at up in Seattle, but I've never had something on any of my airplanes that would have me question the safety of the airplane. And we're not going to go if we don't feel the airplane is safe. There's a lot of times.
You're in it.
Yes, exactly. There's many times that we have turned down an airplane and said, "No, we're not taking this." Yeah, but you're legal. Yes, we're legal, but this problem that keeps coming up, all you do is reset it and it keeps coming up. And we're going to Europe, and if we have that problem, it's going to cause a lot of problems for us going across the ocean. So, you know, we have the ace in the hole, which is we're not taking this airplane, and our chief pilots will back us up and say, "Yep, don't take that airplane." Now, you know, there, like you saw the wheel fall off of a 737. Well, that has nothing to do with Boeing. And that 737's probably been flying for 10 years. That is a local maintenance problem of something happening there. But it was a Boeing, so Boeing got the blame for that. Now, the door hatch, you know, that could have been, that was obviously something manufacturer-wise. But I've never had any, and I started off flying a brand new airplane, the 787, the Dreamliner. So there were, you know, some growing pains with that airplane. But we always had 2 or 3 maintenance guys at our gate when we got ready to go. And when we first got the airplane, it was always a Boeing representative there because it was new to everybody. So they were very serious about making sure everybody knew what was going on. So I have no problem. And I did look up something, and there hasn't been a Class A accident or a Class 1 accident in years. I can't remember the last one. And that is when you've lost a hull, the aircraft itself was destroyed, or someone died on an airplane. Except for, you know, a window where that poor lady got sucked out. But it is still the safest mode of transportation out there. And it's just kind of sad. It's been sensationalized as far as
it sells newspapers.
Yes, it does. It does. And maybe Boeing did need to do a little shake up, but I just want the traveling public to rest assured that you're flying on a safe airplane, and you know, we make sure of it too.
Let's take it one step further. You got the equipment side. Now let's look at the human side. What kind of training do you have to do annually to keep your license?
For us at American, it was every 9 months, and it's different between airlines. We would do recurrent training and you do 2 days of academics, some required human factors, which I thought was probably the best training, which looks at some incidences, not actual aircraft accidents, but incidences that we go over and we learn from. And it's all a pilot group, and there's no holds bar. It's like, hey, if you had something, let us know. And there's guys that have said, hey, this is what happened to me. And we're like, oh my gosh. So we learn from that. Then we do a day of academics, pure academics on the aircraft and the different things that we have to know about flying overseas with diversions and stuff like that. And then 2 days of simulators where you get into the sim, and it's 4 hours. So you're in there for 2 hours, take a break, in there for 2 hours. And it's everything that they can throw at you. The weather is never good. The winds are always strong off of one side or the other. Wet runways, you're always a heavy. You take off, you lose an engine.
The engine's out, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, right. Where do you lose it? You lose it right at rotation, and you barely have enough thrust. And you take off, and you have to coordinate with the other pilot who you've never flown with. But our procedures are such that they're all very standard. So I could jump in the airplane with someone I don't even know, and we would click because our procedures are very standard. So we do, 4 hours of that. And then the next day you do a check ride, whereas, hey, you could be downed or you could be grounded if you don't do well on those. And you work as a crew, and it happens every once in a while. And you do, one scenario is you take off from like Boston, you have an engine problem, or you have a weather problem or something like that. You have to divert into Kennedy and take care of it there, or you're over in the middle of the Atlantic and you have an engine failure. There's a boatload of problems.
You can't pull over and think about it.
No, you can't. And you can't just go, oh, well, let's just descend. No, you can't, because there's people right below you. So you got to get off the track, descend. So the training is it was never easy. And that's one thing I won't miss about retiring is all the training that we had to do. And most of us, probably 2 months before we'd have to go for our recurrent training, we're in the books again, studying all the information that we have to know, all the systems of the airplane and the procedures. So
as a passenger, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Speaking for the entire audience. Let me ask you one final question, okay?
Sure.
You got someone in high school or college who wants to become a pilot. What kind of advice do you have to give them?
I would say do your research. Get online. These kids, they know how to do that. And there's really two roads to go down. There's one to go the military route. It's a little bit longer. It's a heck of a lot more fun, flying wise. Or you go the civilian route, which is more expensive. I.e., you go to a college like Embry-Riddle. And I've had a couple kids. I don't even know if I flew with him, but he just went home to his dad and said, Dad, I want to do what Mr. Blust does. And he is flying for Delta now because he went to Embry-Riddle and went through their system, got hired on a commuter airline. And that's what you're going to have to do. You're not going to go from Embry-Riddle and go right to American. You're going to have to put your time in at a smaller airline, a commuter, or do corporate, fly for a company for a little bit, or fly privately, small jet that way. But you got to get your time. And then once you got your time, you put it in the system and you can get hired. But I recommend the kids do your homework. Maybe the military is not for you, but it's a great way to get into the civilian world. And then, like I said, it's a lot of fun. You're going to see the world, fly some great airplanes, and fly with some great crews.
Great. Yeah, I'll put a plug in for West Liberty, which is working with Marshall on
Yeah.
the aviation right now. It might be something for, again, pilots who just want to, that's a good way to find out. And I just walked in one day and said, teach me to fly.
It is a little expensive if you're going to walk off the street and do
well,
it.
this was before you were born, so it wasn't that
Yeah.
expensive. Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for this discussion. I think people gained a lot of insight into your industry and what it takes. I think they're going to feel a lot better when next time they get aboard a plane. Again, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the audience too. I'm Pete Holloway. We'll be seeing you next week.
Hi, I'm Jason Ake. I'm a grad student at West Liberty University, and I'm working on the Earthworm Lab. So we're attempting to study some invasive earthworms here on the campus property. We have a survey area where we go out and try and figure out how many they are, where they are, what species they are. Earthworms are really small, of course, and you don't really think about them, and you hear about them being good for gardens and all that. But these invasive earthworms live out in the woods and they eat basically everything. They live in the dirt, they eat leaves, wood, take all the nutrients out of the forest. Plants can't grow, bugs can't find food, even trees start dying because they run out of nutrients. So our end goal is just trying to get a better understanding of the species. We're using some new spatial analysis techniques. I really hope that we can include this research to write my master's thesis.
Hi, my name is Mackenzie Hall and I'm a grad student in the 3+2 General Biology program here at West Liberty. I am currently doing research under Dr. Schmidt and I'm working with Francisella tularensis and Neisseria gonorrhea. I am doing research with Resirufin pentyl ether and we're looking at the antimicrobial activity of this compound against those two bacteria. I met Dr. Schmidt my first year here at West Liberty and she introduced me to her lab space and then she invited me in, asked me to do some research, and it's really important in the world because our bacteria are becoming more resistant to antibiotics, so developing more analogs that are active against bacteria is very important. Being able to do research at the undergraduate and graduate level here at West Liberty has given me the opportunity to learn new techniques that I can use in future research in positions that I may apply for later on in life.
From humble beginnings in 1837, West Liberty University has been home to thousands of students. Whether you're a recent high school graduate or looking to complete a college degree later in life, starting your educational career at West Liberty University will be the catalyst for your future. This is a place where you will discover who you are and where you belong, surrounded by lifelong friends and a supportive faculty and staff. Start your journey home at westliberty.edu.